Hello and welcome back to Arcade City, a series of retro game on where I explore choice arcade original games on my DIY wooden RetroPie arcade stick. The aim is to check out oddities in the genre or games that were never converted for home use. I also missed out on the golden days of arcades because of my age. I wish to explore as much as I can now, since playing real arcades in the present is still a special novelty. Today's subject is Golden Axe: The Revenge of Death Adder. While the original was a smash hit and received ports and sequels to consoles, the highly anticipated return to the series in the arcade stayed firmly in place. Released in the July of 1992 by Sega AM1, utilising a System 32 arcade board, The Revenge of Death Adder wouldn't see an official release to the home for nearly 30 years. As you'll see, this was a crying shame, but don't take my brief word for it, let's delve right in. The Revenge of Death Adder was released in two variants, a 2-player cabinet, but also a new 4-player option if you could find that many friends. Regardless of the cabinet, there are 4 players to choose from. There's Sternblade, your typical Conan the Barbarian stereotype, Goa the Giant, who has Gilius Thunderhead riding on his back casting spells, and is the only returning character, Dora the Explorer Horse Lady, and lastly, Little Trix, an undesirable elf. The gameplay style is very similar to the original Golden Axe, although lots of nice added extras are offered. A side-scrolling beat-em-up, Death Adder is somehow back, causing havoc, and it's your goal to take out his many minions and release captured slaves. The game takes you through many varied environments on your journey, and even offers several forks in the road. In the US version, you'll play every level before the final showdown regardless, but if you wish to skip at least 2 levels to see the ending sooner, the Japanese variant doesn't loop back around to them. Attacks are as you'd expect, using melee weapons, but combining different directions and the jump button will weld interesting results. I preferred playing as Dora the Horse Lady since you can attack with her baton facing forward, but also kick out your hind horse legs as if you've just been branded. This is useful since enemies love to flank you when there's millions of them on screen. Also at your disposal are Ridable Beasts, much like in the first game. The attacks while riding these ghastly looking creatures range from melees with longer range to fireballs, which are immensely useful. It can be hard to stay on them though. If you let too many enemies gang up on you, you'll be spending more of your time getting knocked off than you'll be attacking. After you've been knocked off too many times, the beasts will get fed up and flee, rightly so too. Alternatively, there are devices flinging projectiles like spears and cannonballs. These operate for a finite amount of time, but are useful at taking out large amounts of enemies rapidly, as long as they don't get behind you of course. I've mentioned flanking several times already for good reason. You'll be spending a lot of time defending all fronts. Lastly, magic makes a return, but features a bit differently from the original. Instead of building up power, a set number of potions need to be collected to perform a special move. These vary between the characters, but are usually a great way to eliminate groups of enemies at once. All that is, except for Little Trix. Some may wonder why I referred to old mate Trix as undesirable earlier. It's not personal, I swear. But if you're playing with unlimited coins like I am, Trix's special move isn't that appealing. Instead of a graphically intense attack that wipes out all the enemies on screen in a single swoop, Trix will, wait for it, grow an apple tree. Yeah. Apples off the tree provide health, which I'm sure is very useful if you're paying actual cash for more continues, but as a free play fiend, I just want those awesome screen clearers. So I can see his purpose, but for my playthroughs, any of the other characters are obvious choices. Lastly, on the topic of gameplay, I should mention that there are some very basic platforming sections. These don't amount to much more than jumping over gaps, but if you miss, a life will be lost. The jumping mechanics haven't been programmed particularly well either, almost like they were an afterthought. Making it over the gap feels very rigid indeed. But hey, not like I care, I could just push a button for another life, but imagine it would be very frustrating if I had to part with more legal currency for the honour of making the jumps. The graphics are a standout in The Revenge of Death Adder, a huge improvement over the original released several years previously. The sprites are nice and big, the environments are filled to the brim with detail, and the added extras really add up to a brilliant visual experience. For example, in between scenes there's an animation of a hand pointing out different locations on a map. At first it made me laugh since it does look a bit cheesy, but the detail and animation are quite impressive if you look more closely. It almost seems as if it's utilising pre-rendered 3D, although I don't know that for a fact. Either way, I'm sure it would have been impressive in the early 90s, and a suitable reward for beating a scene. Unfortunately, I did experience graphical glitches throughout my playthrough, but this seems to be caused by the fact that RetroPie is running a version of MAME from 2003. I kid you not. Watching others play online, I didn't see any examples of the glitches I experienced, so if you're playing on a version of main that didn't release when I was 10 years old, you'll likely be okay. The biggest issue is that several vertical scrolling segments render completely wrong. Potions will also drop in mid-air, although they can still be picked up. This brings me to my next point, however: modern official releases. The game almost famously didn't get the home treatment for decades, with a completely different game, Golden Axe 2, seeing a release on the Mega Drive instead. But in 2020, it saw not just one, but two official releases. Straight from Sega themselves, the Astro City Mini Arcade Stick featured a slew of games including the Revenge of Death Adder. Additionally, Arcade 1UP released a nearly 4-foot tall arcade machine based on the Golden Axe series. Along with the Revenge of Death Adder in the original game, there's also Shinobi, Altered Beast, and Wrestle War. Revenge of Death Adder even features on the cabinet's artwork, which is nice. It's finally receiving the attention it deserves. It's also been reported that there are no graphical glitches present. You'd expect that would be the case, but it's great it's been confirmed nonetheless. Glitch free, but not for free, if you will. You'll have to stick to MAME if you're broke like me. On that note, I'm glad that Revenge of Death Adder is finally being appreciated in an official capacity. It's a great game, and I'd highly recommend checking it out if you have the means to.